Hi there, it's Shannon at Squint. Welcome to the Squint podcast. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Carrie Bennett, lead faculty member at the Quantum Biology Collective. She is passionate, knowledgeable, and one of the emerging leaders in the quantum health community. Just like us, she loves to take a closer look at health, studying the latest research to better understand how our bodies work at a cellular level. We got the chance to talk to her about circadian rhythm, light, remember, getting our light right, grounding, water, all the Squintessentials, and why they are so important to optimizing your health.
Am I on?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
Great to see you. I think it was, did I see you in San Diego?
Yeah, like almost a year ago.
Yeah, at the Hydrate conference.
Yeah, wild. Yeah,
Really fun.
yeah, that was cool. It was really, yeah, I mean, that was what inspired me to actually go to Europe to do Jerry's thing because it's so cool to be in person with people. You just forget, like this is cool, but you forget how much cooler it is
It's so true.
to be with
He
people.
signed my fourth phase of water book. I was
Oh,
geeked
that's
out. I was
awesome.
so excited.
Oh, that's so cool.
He is
I love
amazing.
it. Yeah, yeah, he's the real deal. Like sometimes you meet people in person, and you're like, oh, that's a bummer. But like he was the real deal for me. So that was really cool.
Well, you are the real deal for me. And I am so honored to have you on the podcast. And I was thinking back. So I was part of your first cohort of
Right,
students in your practitioner mentorship, which is
right.
kind of incredible, right?
I
Like
know.
to think where you've gone and where quantum biology has gone. And it's really
It's
exciting.
like a thing now.
It is. It is. It's a thing. We're a thing. So anyway, you are the perfect teacher, and this is the perfect time to talk about all the things that you talk about and all the things circadian rhythm. So I'm so excited to talk to you today. And I wanted to if we can just kind of dive right in, because there's so much to cover, and I just want to make the best use of our time. So anyway, I'm talking a lot about getting your light right. And my listeners are learning about the importance of daytime light and darkness at night. Can you just start us out a little bit with the basics of circadian rhythm, but more particularly the wavelengths of light in the morning? What I learned from you is, the morning UVA rise, that's when the magic happens. Can you kind of start and go through this, at least the quantum morning before we get to the rest of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is a perfect place to start for people because I noticed the biggest shift and change in my health and my energy focusing on the morning. And that has just been true across the board in my clientele as well. And so to start off with, I think people need to realize that we're designed to have a rhythm in the first place. And modern life has really kind of taken that away from us. And that rhythm and it's been around since creation began. And that's this rhythm of a period of daylight and a period of darkness. And that can vary depending on where you're located, depending on the season. But either way, there's always was a period of daytime and a period of darkness. And it turns out that the human body and all of creation, frankly, is really intelligent. We were able to adapt our physiology and the types of programs that we run inside of our bodies based on the time of day. Because it would take a ton of energy to run every single program all the time. And so instead, we said, okay, this is the start of the day. Let's start to rev up the thyroid, the adrenals, the pancreas for digestion, right? Cognition in the brain. And then, throughout the day, you have various programs that have what we would call a circadian rhythm to them. And then that period of darkness where the body gets to go into deep tissue repair when it knows, okay, I'm not going to be doing anything, right? I'm going to be sleeping. This is an ideal situation for me to turn on those repair programs. And that's our circadian rhythm. But in order for our circadian rhythm to know these things and know what programs to run, it has to sync up with the appropriate light signals coming from the sun. And when I say sun, I know you live in a fairly sunny part of the country. I, on the other hand, live in a place where we can get significant amounts of clouds. And I want people to know that it doesn't matter, right? What I'm talking about here, it could be cloudy. It could be sunny. The sun could be behind a tree, a building, a mountain. It doesn't matter when we start to lay out the X's and O's of this. So what I realized was that in my own health journey, I was never signaling correct morning. What I was doing was waking up and immediately looking at my cell phone and then flipping on all the lights in the house. And this was before sunrise. And it turns out that the light that I was putting into my eyes had the same intensity and signaling as the middle of the afternoon. So I was, and all of us are doing this these days. The vast majority of us are fast forwarding and skipping over these beautiful morning wavelengths that can really signal some key pathways. And so the kind of the strategy is we want to make sure that we block the artificial light before sunrise, and that's as simple as orange tone blue blockers. I had the ugliest pair on today, right? I had to drive to Walgreens to get something for one of my children before sunrise. And you just do it, right? You just suck it up and go in and you look like that weirdo. And you think you're a bigger, no one says anything these days. I mean, I don't know. I don't get very, I get very few looks. I always think I was like, oh, people are gonna look at me like I'm the biggest weirdo. I'm like, there must be a lot of weirdos out here because I don't get looked at. But anyways, so and then come sunrise is this beautiful opportunity. Because if we've blocked all that artificial stuff that fast forwards our timing and our rhythm into the middle of the afternoon, if we've blocked that and we go outside at around the moment of sunrise, when the sun starts to cross the horizon, we get this beautiful, intense, but balanced blend of blue and red. And that is the signal to the brain that the day has started. Prior to that, the red would be dominant and there would be blue, but the blue needs to increase in intensity until the point to signal the start of the day. And the way this happens, Shannon, is that we've got these little sensors in the backs of the eyes. And these little sensors are literally blue light sensors. And they're designed to say, oh, this is how much blue light is coming from the sun in Carrie's environment, and communicate that to a clock in the brain. There's a direct pathway to the clock in the brain that controls my circadian rhythm, my body's perception of what time of day it is. And so that blue was perfect because that blue is just a little bit in the morning or like at sunrise. And then as the sun goes higher and higher in the sky, we get more intense blue until it reaches that high point in the sky at what's called solar noon. And then the blue starts to go away until there's no blue after sunset. So blue tells time. The changing blue tells time. And in the morning alone, like I was saying, that kicks off so many pathways that are primed in our bodies for two purposes: survival and reproduction. If we can get that morning light signaling into our eyes, we will have energy, our digestion will be ready, and our hormones will be balanced. If we don't get those morning wavelengths of light at least consistently, that's where things start to go awry. That's where I began to have what's called adrenal fatigue, which, it's not true adrenal fatigue, but it's massive hormone dysregulation, and then including then issues with my hormones of my reproductive hormones as well. And so morning light up until a certain point, right? Because the brain is keying in on transitions or when light appears. So that first light, that first signature of that blue, that was the first thing that my brain needed to know in order to say the day has begun. And then the blue increases and the sun gets to a certain part of the sky where it's 10 degrees above the horizon. And when the sun's at that height in the sky, the ultraviolet coming from the sun can start to penetrate into your local environment. And it's called UVA light, ultraviolet A. And clinically, we've referred to it now as UVA rise. That UVA light is rising. And that UVA rise in the morning is what I call neurotransmitter magic. And it's magical for so many things. And so I would have clients get out there for a certain chunk of time because of all the benefits it then does with its appearance. And we can dive a little bit deeper into that in a second, Shannon, but I want to lay out the bigger picture. And then at some point, depending on the time of year, if the sun reaches 30 degrees above the horizon, ultraviolet B appears, another signature, another appearance. And that does a whole host of things as well. And then they start to disappear. But their appearance and us catching their appearance in the morning is by far, at least sunlight is useful at all times, but by far clinically, in people who are looking to reverse dis-ease, getting those morning wavelengths has been phenomenal in terms of having that as a tool in the toolbox because of all of the signaling it initiates.
That's amazing. It's really amazing too about the blue light, the melanopsins, these non-visual photoreceptors that we have in our eyes. So we're perfectly designed to accept this perfectly calibrated light. It's pretty incredible. I don't know. The blue light it's basically our bookend for the day, right? So we start with this blue and then it's solar noon. Is that the crescendo kind of right around noon? And
Yeah, solar noon. At solar noon, you get all of the colors, ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, all the red, and you get the max out of colors, if you will, and their intensities at solar noon. And
okay,
then just like a mirror image, they start to go away.
right.
And so, yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head in terms of that blue and that how we are exquisitely tuned into getting that blue and feeling in the morning more alert, more energized. It's also though the reason, remember back in the day, all we had were incandescent bulbs. Well, and I mean fluorescent lighting in various industries, but for the vast majority, it was incandescent bulbs that lack that blue. And
Right.
the initial research into incandescent bulbs or switching from incandescent to the LED, and these LED bulbs had that really sharp, big spike of blue, was for productivity at work, for people to have more focus and more concentration, which happens to a certain extent. They aren't going to maybe feel as tired with the more warmer amber tone incandescents to the brighter toned LEDs. But with those brighter toned LEDs and that sharp spike of blue, we put our brain into zombie land in terms of what time it is because that blue never changes, unlike the sun, where it's always changing and we're able to tell time because of the changes. And so, yes, the blue was actually shifted and put into light bulbs to make people feel more energized, but there has been long-term consequences because of other issues with it as well.
So can we go back to UV? Because UV is always fascinating to me because everything I've ever learned is, stay away from UV, protect yourself from UV, wear your sunscreen, use UV protected lenses in your sunglasses. And so now we're learning that these are actually all circadian disruptors for this circadian rhythm that you described. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that UVA rise. And you said it's at 10 degrees. So we're saying that time of morning, it's a great time to go on a walk to get that UV light in your eyes and on your skin and even on your abdomen for gut health.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then how does that, can you explain the melanin story with that too? And because I'm trying to tell the people that follow Squint to get a tan, and some people say, oh, there's no safe tan. You can't have a tan, but how important that tan is, which is that melanin developing in your skin, which develops from this important UVA light that we're starting to get more of now. Like we're dialing up the UV a little bit, and so we kind of
Yes.
need to dial it into our daily routine.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yes, for certain. Um, First and foremost, that UV light, if anyone has been, like you said, there's a lot of fear mongering about ultraviolet light. And so if at first you are afraid that ultraviolet light is designed to be harmful, and you don't want it on your skin, I always have people just get the signal through the eyes, right? So sit in the shade if you want to outside at UVA rise in the morning, and you'll start to notice your cognition is going to be so much better. Your mood, your motivation, your thyroid will actually respond even more. The number of people in my community who have had to adjust their thyroid medications because of getting UVA rise, right?
Right.
It's just phenomenal. And I'm not a
Amazing.
doctor. I can't tell you to adjust your medications, but
Right.
just make note, like you're improving thyroid hormone because of this signaling that we're talking about. And so, and so that would be step one, because you will notice a huge boost with all the things that we just mentioned there. But then the next step would be like, okay, so if UV light actually gave me those results, like if I'm actually feeling that much better with ultraviolet light through my eyes, where been told to wear sunglasses my whole life, maybe that makes me want to rethink what's happening with ultraviolet light on my skin. And ultraviolet light, we have sensors for ultraviolet light all throughout our skin, right? If it was somehow harmful, we would get a little bit of ultraviolet light and there would be a massive signal, right? That massive signal would be instantaneous pain or something like that, right? And so what we need to realize is that no, when you look at how those ultraviolet receptors on the skin are called, and in the eyes are called neuropsin receptors. If you look at how those neuropsin receptors are kind of tied into signaling pathways, you realize, oh my goodness, ultraviolet light on my skin actually signals things to my body. It reduces pain. It improves satiety. It can signal lipolysis, which is the utilization of fat as a fuel source. And then ultimately, if we've reached a threshold where we all have different amounts of melanin in our skin, right? We're born with different amounts of melanin in our skin. And Oftentimes that's tied to historically where our ancestors came from and the intense amount of light that they had been exposed to. So I have what would be called like a Fitzpatrick type 2 skin type. So very little melanin in my skin. And I always thought, oh gosh, I'm gonna burn. I'm gonna burn. Or I did think like there was no such thing as a healthy tan. But it turns out that if you slowly allow your body to adapt to the sun, so come springtime here, I just started doing it. I've been starting to lay out. The weather started to be nice stuff. I'm starting to lay out, and gradually, slowly but surely, I'm soaking up all of this sunlight, which I hope we can also talk about, not just through melanin, but through the lens of like exclusion zone water and true energy for the body. Literally, you have to realize that light on the skin gives us energy. We're no different than plants in that way. And then as my skin starts to experience more intense ultraviolet light, things will happen. The first thing that happens is we produce a chemical in the skin called urocanic acid. And that urocanic acid can act as a slight ultraviolet film or ultraviolet, almost endogenous sunscreen, if you will. It's like, okay, Carrie's getting more ultraviolet light. And yes, intense, unopposed ultraviolet light without conditioning your skin, that can create some inflammatory cascades. But in this slow buildup process, the body says, okay, yeah, there's a little more ultraviolet light that Carrie's getting. Let's have urocanic acid. Then, if I'm out there a little longer or the light's more intense, the body will say, okay, urocanic acid isn't enough. We've got to give Carrie another signal that at this time, the amount of sunlight she's getting on her skin is a bit intense. We haven't adapted to it yet. And so you'll create a histamine pinketing. It's called an erythema response. And this is the pinketing that many of us have probably experienced where, okay, looks, is this a sunburn? No, it's just a pinketing because later on in the day or the next morning, we wake up and there's no pink, right? A true sunburn lingers, right? That can be true damage and it lingers. So this erythema is just a signal. Hey, Carrie, you haven't built up the tolerance to this intense amount of sunlight yet. Get in the shade, put a cover up on, put a hat on.
Right.
But over time, what's going to happen is my skin says, okay, Carrie's been doing this regularly. Let's give her more melanin. And
Mhm.
when it gives me more melanin, that tan actually is an adaptation to the light. It's not damage.
Right.
And it turns out, as you alluded to in this beautiful question, that melanin is also a way we extract energy from sunlight.
Mhm.
Because melanin, it can capture light. The reason why melanin can layer itself in darker and darker pigmentation is because it will absorb light. So people with highly melanated skin can absorb so many wavelengths of light. And what they do when they absorb those wavelengths of light is the water that exists right next to that melanin molecule. All molecules in the body are surrounded by water. Melanin's no exception. And so the water right next to that melanin, as that melanin soaks in the light energy, it provides the energy to break the water molecule apart. And that broken water molecule becomes something called molecular hydrogen and molecular oxygen. And very beautiful and interesting research is indicating that we can use that independent of breathing, tissue oxygenation. We can use that process in various parts of our body to fuel the cells and the organs in different parts of our body. So that hydrogen acts as an electron donor, that oxygen obviously will help the mitochondria make water, and the process will just continue that way. And so we've just been fed, I mean, a half truth, I think would be complimentary. I feel like we've just not been given any of the correct knowledge regarding how much our body is designed to interact with light, to use light as fuel, to use light as a signal. That light isn't out to get us and to harm us, but instead we're designed to adapt to greater and greater solar exposures for all of the benefits that we can derive.
Right. And I loved what you said about photosynthesis because it's really interesting when you're talking to people about the sun and you talk about photosynthesis, they say, "Oh, yes, yes, yes. There's chloroplasts in the leaves and the sun hits that and we create energy." Well, we do the same thing, except our chloroplasts are hemoglobin. We have blood and the sun hits the blood. And then the other thing I think is so funny is that if you had an orange tree and you put a tarp over it, it would die. I mean, these are basic concepts and we just don't think this way. But just to understand how important the sun is to triggering all these pathways in our body, the thyroid, the hormones, sleep, sleep is such a big issue these days. And I don't want to really get off the wavelengths, but I do want to just take a little segue to melatonin
Yeah.
because it's such I wrote a blog and it said, are you a melatonin junkie? Because you find that everyone has their kind of attack for sleep. Is it, a 5 milligram night? Is it a 10 milligram night? Because I mean, it's true because
I
we're not
know.
getting natural sunlight during the day and then we're on our phones at night. But what I learned from you, which was so interesting, was that I thought that all the melatonin was made in the pineal gland. But in fact, 95% of the melatonin we make is actually at a cellular level. And that melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone, it's basically our master antioxidant that controls all these programs that happen when we have restorative sleep. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's so beautiful that you're just highlighting all this stuff because yes, that pineal melatonin, it can be very important and we can talk about maximizing that. And in fact, morning light helps us to maximize that pathway. But that's 5% of the melatonin that our body produces. 95% of the melatonin that is produced in our body throughout the course of a day is inside of our cells. It's made by our mitochondria. It's called subcellular melatonin. And in order for the mitochondria to get the energy they need to make that melatonin, they need exposure to what's called near infrared light, which is just outside of the visible spectrum that we would see of light through a rainbow, sunlight through a rainbow. Just above the red is this huge range of light called infrared that we can't see. You can get night goggles. There's ways that humans have been able to visualize it. But the
It's
mitochondria,
most of our light, right? I mean, more than 50% of
more
our
than 50% of
during
our
the
light
day
is in
is
that
at,
infrared.
right. So much light we can't see, but it's so valuable to our health.
And it's what's now being omitted, right? Because modern lighting doesn't have any infrared and modern window glass blocks 40% or more of it because for energy efficiency purposes for the building, but energy deficiency purposes for the human. Because
That's
we
right.
have
Yeah.
we have this that what this melatonin does inside of the cells is it stays in that local cell because a cell is metabolically active and during the day it's very metabolically active depending on the organs. And what's happening as that cell goes through natural metabolism is it creates byproducts like damage, if you will, like natural metabolic damage. That then, if we're getting the correct light exposures on our skin, we then can make the melatonin, which in the cell acts as a cleanup crew for that damage. It's an antioxidant, a master antioxidant. Everyone talks about glutathione. Everyone talks about like these vitamin E, vitamin C, vitamin A. No,
Mhm.
melatonin is the main antioxidant that we make inside of our cells. But because we're not around infrared these days, we're not making it. And I've had people say, well, what happens in the middle of winter? Like, what were people doing? What were indigenous people doing in the middle of winter? They had campfire. They had fire. They had an infrared based source of heat and light for their interior environments. They still had access to that same infrared. And so it's now been, I would say, what would you say, Shannon, with the windows and the bulbs? Really, we're on like about a 20-year, I would say, experiment, maybe a little longer, of taking those beneficial infrared wavelengths out of our living spaces. And what we're not seeing improved health. That's for sure. And so when you get people to understand that, again, the reason why I want that light on my skin and I don't want to fear it is because when all that ultraviolet light is present, so is all this infrared. There's ultraviolet is like 2%
Right.
of all the light.
Right.
50% is this infrared. And this infrared, if your ultraviolet light is creating any little inflammatory cascades, you want to make the melatonin in the cells to help to clean that up. That's part of the process, the adaptation process. And when people slowly adapt to sunlight, I believe they've got a different experience with sunlight in terms of their skin, in terms of their solar adaptation, as opposed to people who do intermittent sunlight exposure and intermittent sunlight exposure with sunglasses on. Because you can't adapt, you can't do the little titrating effect. And instead, you're more likely to overdo a session. And if your eyes don't see no ultraviolet light, they think it's dark outside, and your skin is getting UV index of 7, 8, 9, and you haven't seen the light of day on your skin in a long time, that's where you start to create these aggressive inflammatory cascades. The
Which is
brain
so
needs,
funny because the image when I go to the beach in the summer and you see these people, and it's always the people that have sunglasses on that are burned.
Right.
I mean, they're sitting there and they have their sunglasses on and maybe their sunscreen, but basically, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're with the sunglasses, you're blocking your brain from understanding what rays of light your body is experiencing, and that these we're perfectly calibrated so that our brain can tell through our eyes what sun we're getting to protect our skin. So our systems are designed with a natural sunscreen. We just
Yeah.
we are absolutely created to be in the sun all day. I mean, that's what our life was before modern life. And
Yeah.
now we've introduced blue, a lot more blue. So let's talk about that a little bit. Sorry, I just want I
No,
want to
I
get
love it.
into
I
it.
love it. No,
But
no, you're highlighting so many beautiful things. So I absolutely love it. You're exactly right. We are designed to be in the light. And now with people, I don't want people to think that you have to be naked and
right,
sunbathing yourself, right, for 10 hours a day.
right,
Because as you alluded to, this light signaling, a lot of it is through the eyes and syncing up what going through the eyes and then what is incidentally touching the skin. So on my walk this morning, right, my UVA walk this morning, it was nice enough that I was wearing a skort, and shorter shirts. And I would want to sync that up. I would want my eyes to incidentally say, oh yeah, there's ultraviolet A. And my skin would say, oh yeah, there's ultraviolet A. And they're communicating to say, okay, do we need to do anything right now to adapt Carrie's skin to this? That's what's happening. And when you block it, the adaptation process fails.
right. And I just wanted to add one more thing, just in terms, I'm at Squint, I love to talk about morning routines, like simple, light routines that you can do each and every day, because most of the people will never get to your level just of
Right.
understanding quantum biology. So my goal is really, keep it simple, daily routines, sunrise is, non-negotiable if you can do it, but if you can't, get out as early as you can. Don't kick yourself. Every day is a new day. And you start with getting your light right every day. And so getting that morning sun and then taking sun breaks throughout the day.
Yes.
Figuring out a way. If you have a Zoom call, maybe you don't schedule that Zoom call during UVA rise,
Right. Right.
really, and just to think of
I,
our schedule instead of living by the Apple calendar. Let's, not full blown Mayan, but let's start living by the sun, you know?
Well, yeah, exactly. And even so I've worked my schedule as such that, kid duties, and then I've got a chunk of time after school drop off. And I typically don't start like this for me. This is 10:30 this was 10:30 in the morning, Eastern time when I started this with you. And it's one of those things where I specifically, my calendar, you'll see I specifically have a chunk of time in the morning because of this. Now, if people can't organize their lives that particularly, I have clients who work in an office and I say, can you take your laptop outside? Where's your picnic table? Where's your community space? Right? Can you go into your car even? I've had clients go into their car with their windows down, and we all have a cell phone. What can you do from your cell phone? And again, it's like about recognizing this as being a priority and then working your life as a way to try to make it work.
Right.
Even my big box office, like they work in a big box store, right? You have 15-minute breaks. My line workers, you have your 15-minute breaks. You've got your lunch break. Take them outside, right? All these things matter. And then there's always a part of the year where typically where people live, where you are driving to work during this time. Drive with the windows down or park somewhere and get a few extra minutes before you go into the office. Now, like you said too, there is you know me, Shannon, I think fear is the worst thing we could do for health, right? Fear is by far worse than even circadian rhythm disruption, fearing everything. So
Yeah.
I tell people, as you so beautifully mentioned, you do the best you can. So if you are in Iceland, which I've had people, email me, it's like, well, what do I do when the sun wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning? No, I don't need you seeing the sunrise. We are too beautifully intelligent to have to do that. If you can, it's a beautiful. If it's like a 6 a.m., 7, if you can do that, it's a beautiful morning strategy. But if that's you, then you wake up and you make natural light be the first light that strikes your eyes.
Right.
You open the curtains, open the window, or you go right outside. And the issue becomes is if we get caught on the scroll when we first wake up in the morning. And instead, the brain can say, based on the blue and how it changes, the brain can bump us right into the correct time of day. And so, yeah, so do the best you can. And when you can capture the sunrise, do it. When you can really truly capture UVA rise, do it because you will see results with that.
Right. And then I'd love to have a conversation because I think there can't be a conversation about light without grounding.
Yeah.
And so that's such an important, it's just, it's a practice that's definitely changed my life. And it's so funny because, there's fear in health, but there's also stereotypes. And the stereotypes really are frustrating too, because, oh, you want to hug a tree, you're hippy dippy, or, you're categorized as something like you can call me whatever you want. I don't care.
I'm sure
Uh,
I've been called every name in the book by this point.
right.
So
The reality is that our bodies are designed to connect with nature. And we
yeah.
all know that when we go to the beach and when we connect with nature, I mean, we all feel great after a vacation. Many of those are in nature outside. So we understand this kind of intuitive connection with nature. Can you talk a little bit about the power of grounding? And in particular, what I'm trying to teach too is it's not just about being barefoot. It's about connecting with anything that is connected to the earth. So you can be in shoes and you can hug a tree. It's just these little things. If you're, having 5 minutes and you go outside and get your sun break, well, take off your shoes too and tap into that unlimited supply of electrons. Can you kind of talk about
Yeah.
electrons and energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes back to probably, I mean, my seventh grader was doing this. I got to, his teacher doesn't always appreciate what I teach him, but I got to go over this with him this year. And he was learning about the electron transport chain, learning about mitochondria.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of us now have this awareness that these things called mitochondria exist inside of our cells. And these mitochondria are designed to make energy. And unfortunately, the energy that we've been taught that they make we've been taught that they make ATP, which that's again a half truth, right? In terms of the energy. But the real truth is, adding on to that though, is that the mitochondria don't take in a carbohydrate or a fat molecule, right? They take the electrons, the negative charge from those entities, and they funnel that negative charge through this thing called the electron transport chain. And the end result is the production of water and ATP. And those work together as energy, and those work together to allow our cells to run all of their programs. And so it's all about the name of the game. When I found out, when I had this awareness that the name of the game was electrons or negative charge, I thought to myself, well, what are all the ways we can get negative charge? Like, how does this work in the body? And as I already alluded to, sunlight striking the skin, that splits a water molecule and you get the electrons from that water. That's negative charge. The water inside of our cells is negatively charged, and you can enhance that negative charge with light, which we can talk about more. And earthing is a profound way to do it because the surface of the earth, you have what are called lightning discharges, right? So there's this cavity between the ionosphere, part of the atmosphere, and then the surface of the earth, and a charge differential builds up. So one becomes more positive, one's more negative. And where lightning feels like the earth is getting too positive, it will discharge electrons to that part of the earth. And that maintains a reservoir of negative charge on the surface of the planet at all times. And if we're designed to be full of negative charge, all we have to do is plug ourselves in. And the way we plug ourselves into the earth is with bare skin, touching any living thing in the earth. It could be grass, it could be that tree, the bush, the plant. It doesn't have to be quote unquote living, even if you're thinking about things like dirt or sand. I think water is conscious. So, I mean, but water too, right? So, and so you get this. So anytime we touch those natural surfaces, we are pulling Earth's charge into us. And the effect is instantaneous when you look at it from a perspective of nervous system regulation, literally within seconds. And I work with people who have had histories of major traumas, right? Massive nervous system dysregulation, who find that earthing is a mainstay in allowing their brain and their nervous system to start to re-regulate itself, bring itself back into balance. And so Within seconds, you're going to get a balancing of the autonomic nervous system. And within minutes, you'll start to see before and after images where blood cells were drained of their negative charge and then they replenish them. Or inflammatory cascades, like let's say an arthritic shoulder or a knee will start to have calming in terms of their inflammatory cascades. And so the name of the game really truly is the combination of light touching the skin, brain knowing what time of day it is, and then earthing and connecting to that charge. We're giving our body all the energy and information it needs in order to bring itself back into balance and to thriving health. And again, I would have rolled my eyes at myself 15 years ago had I not shown this in my own body. And then again, time and time again in clinical practice.
Right. Amazing. I think the before and after pictures of grounding, of just looking at blood panels,
Right.
blood viscosity, it's
Yeah.
incredible. So kind of, before grounding, the blood is clumped up. And then after grounding, it's just these perfectly concentric circles. And it's just, you can see literally the anti-inflammatory effect. It's so profound and it's so easy and it's so basic. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was that when we look at evolution, and obviously we evolved from apes and then we became bipedal. And in that process of changing, we actually developed sweat glands on our hands and our feet, which is actually to help us ground,
Yeah.
which I thought is so cool. We're actually designed to ground.
Moisture, right? That moisture, it
Sure.
helped. And that
It's a
salt moisture.
conductor. It's a
Salt is just electrolyte solution, right? That's
Exactly.
interestingly, you take distilled water, which is no electrolytes in it, no minerals, nothing in it, right? It's what you consider ultra pure water. It does not conduct electricity. But all of a sudden, you add electrolytes to it, and voila. And so that's what's happening with us. We're just these electrolyte, water rich beings that have the ability then through that to connect to Earth's electrical sources and fuel our bodies with that energy.
One quick question, because you were talking about the electron transport chain and that it's not just an ATP story, that it's a water story. And that was so profound to me because when you hear that your body's 93% water or 98% on a molecular level, I thought, is that all we are? Are we just organs sloshing around? But it's really incredible, the power of water in the body. I want to talk about that. But before that, I want to talk about hydration, because dehydration seems like a big issue. And I see women, they're double fisting their Stanley cups. They're constantly dehydrated. So can you talk a little bit about how our body actually uses the sun to make its own water, kind of the most premium, best water money can buy, your body actually makes, and how important light is for hydration, which is counterintuitive, right? Because we think, oh, I've been in the sun, that's not hydrative at all. But in fact, it is.
It absolutely is. No. And so people are, whenever I talk about water, everyone automatically says, well, what water should I drink? Or what water are you drinking, Carrie? And it's like, yes, that's part of it. But a way bigger piece of this is to recognize that we create our own water, plus we recycle liters of our own water a day. And that is how we truly stay hydrated inside of ourselves. And as I alluded to, that electron transport chain, the end result for those electrons to travel is to end up as a water molecule. And those water molecules then fill our cells. And those water molecules fill our cells with what would be considered negative charge in the way that the water holds energy for us. And so the way that modern living inhibits that is blue light will inhibit that last step, that the what I would call the imbalanced blue light, right? Inhibits that step in the mitochondria where water is made. And so we create what's considered mitochondrial dysfunction and intracellular dehydration. And then you combine that with wireless radiation, which is everywhere, which also impairs the mitochondria and prevents this beautiful water, this energetic water inside of our cells from forming to the fullest extent in the first place. And we're in a world now, in a modern world where we are set up to be dehydrated unless we become more aware. And so the way that we do that is in order for water to be regenerated or produced in the mitochondria again, those mitochondria need exposure to red and near infrared light. Again, missing in modern lighting, being blocked a significant chunk from our window glass. And so we're designed to be in this full spectrum of infrared and red light outside. It's there from dawn all the way through the day until after sunset, until darkness hits. And then we would have had campfire and it would still have been there. And so we're designed to be connected with that all the time. And because we're not, and instead we're around these really big spikes of artificial blue light that lack the red and the near infrared, we're creating this dehydration in our mitochondria. Our mitochondria aren't making the water for our cells. Combine that with wireless radiation, and it truly sets us up for intracellular dehydration, or what I call, was coined by Dr. Bob Mangalej, chronic unintentional dehydration. And you cannot drink your way out of that. You cannot consume water out of that if you're not focusing on getting the light signals and blocking or mitigating the artificial stuff and the wireless radiation to the best of your ability. It's not about living in a cave, right? It's not about becoming a hermit, but it's about saying, okay, maybe that Apple Watch and those AirPods, or, the smart everything in my home might need to switch and pivot and shift in order for my body to truly start to develop its own intracellular hydration strategies again. And then the light on the skin, right? Getting that light on the skin. And that can go a long way towards people finally feeling hydrated again. It's just a missing piece of the story when it comes to truly being hydrated.
Right. It is interesting. I have, a daughter in her 20s, and I see, obviously technology use is so profound, but it's kind of this image of this generation, and they've got their cell phone and they've got their Stanley Cup.
Yep.
And to me, that the dichotomy of that is so interesting. And it's our life. And I think it's just a matter of education. And I think it's like we don't live in a cave. We're not anti-technology, but you can make small routines, small changes that make huge differences. I mean, just adding little things, little small routines every day. Let's do a little grounding. Let's spend a little less time on our phone. Let's not scroll first thing in the morning. Let's get some UVA rise. Let's change this around. And they're just little tweaks that make such big differences. I have to ask you one thing, because it's always the question. So I run into people and it's kind of 8 a.m. and they say, "Oh, Shannon, I'm getting my vitamin D." And I say, "Oh, good for you." But I don't think people are clear
I
about
know.
when you get vitamin D. I think most people know that it's midday sun. But they don't understand the role of cholesterol and how we sulfate cholesterol and the kind of D that we make. And then I want to address this question about, do you supplement or not? And I say no. I say get your D naturally. Obviously, if you have no sun for months on end. But can you address those issues, kind of how vitamin D is actually made? And
Yes.
do you supplement or do you not?
I'm just laughing because I had this exact experience a few days ago on a morning walk. And I stopped because the sun was coming up to the extent that it was starting, the rays were starting to hit my face. And this lovely couple who was going on their walk was like, "Oh, you're soaking up all that vitamin D." And I was like, "Do I?" Nope. I was like, just let it go. Like, yep, this beautiful, isn't it? But that's not when my body is making vitamin D. Okay. In order to make vitamin D, the sun has to reach 30 degrees above the horizon. And that is not available year round where I live. I'm not sure your neck of the woods, Shannon, but where I live, there's a chunk of the year from about beginning of November through the end of January where the sun doesn't reach that height in the sky. So vitamin D isn't present. And so step one would be you have to know if you have the sun reaching that height in the sky. And Sarah Kleiner, I don't know if you've played around with her app at all, but I think she's done a great job.
App. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yeah,
vitamin D, just so people know, it's 30 to 30 in the sky. So that's what I look at. I look at the horizon and I say, okay, 30 to 30, that's what I'm getting.
Yes. And another, just a super basic way would be how long is my shadow? If my shadow is my height or shorter, or if you can't tell your shadow, look at that signpost, right? If the shadow is shorter than the signpost, then the sun is high enough in the sky.
Yeah.
But then you also need the correct UV index, about a 3 or more, which, I mean, even now in Michigan, where we're starting to get a little bit of what I would call spring weather, it's going to get above a 3. And so then from 3 or above, you're going to start to make vitamin D. It has to touch your skin. Light has to touch your skin for this process to happen. So much of what we were saying before can happen through the eyes. And there is actually some vitamin D synthesis through the eyes. But the vast majority of it has to happen through sunlight touching the skin. And so a precursor in the skin, before we make vitamin D, we've got cholesterol. And then when this cholesterol, this form of cholesterol, when it captures this ultraviolet B sunlight, it can become a whole host of vitamin types of vitamin D. So the first thing is they got the cholesterol in the skin. It's called 7-dehydrocholesterol, captures ultraviolet B sunlight. And then the most basic way to say it would be it becomes what's called pre-vitamin D3. And then from pre-vitamin D3, it can literally become dozens of metabolites of vitamin D. And the way science works is until science has discovered what a metabolite does, it calls it inert or it calls it biologically unuseful or unnecessary. And so that's how we kind of have oversimplified it to say, oh, all we need is vitamin D3. And this vitamin D3 we can then take from a pill. So why even bother with the sun? Because remember that sun's out to get us, right? And you cannot consume D3 in a supplement and have it convert into all those metabolic pathways the way that you can with sunlight. You'll only convert a small amount of them. And so sunlight strikes the skin, cholesterol becomes pre-vitamin D3. Pre-vitamin D3 can interconvert into so many metabolites that are beneficial for hormone balance, anti-cancer, cardiovascular support, diabetes. I mean, you name it. That's what we're looking at with light exposure on the skin through that all these vitamin D pathways, which is why vitamin D3 supplementation does not pan out in the research in the same way that you look at longitudinal studies of people who get sunlight on their skin during these windows of time where you can make vitamin D. They're the people who are receiving health benefits, getting the anti-cancer effects, getting the cardiovascular effects, support effects of it. Supplementation does not cut it. And so I don't supplement vitamin D. If I have clients who I think need to make more vitamin D in the winter, which is I'll have to come back and do a whole talk on why that might not be the case. But if I feel like clients do need that pathway stimulated in the winter, we do it through light still, but things like a spurty lamp or well done therapeutic tanning, it can make a difference, but yeah, we're designed to essentially make it when it's available in our local environment. And that's when we have to start taking advantage of it in order to make not only that one version of D, but all the metabolites that we can also store inside of our cells. It doesn't stay elevated in our blood. The only one that really stays elevated in our blood is the vitamin supplemental version, because it requires a lipid carrier. It has to be transported in this little lipid raft to go.
Right.
The vast majority of the ones that are in our blood is called sulfated. It's water soluble vitamin D. It doesn't get tested. So, it's just, we just barked up the wrong tree when it comes to testing vitamin D and thinking that we could supplement it and receive the benefits.
It's true. Well, I think that's kind of, I think about kind of the fear, but more the chaos of health, because everybody needs a quick answer. They want a pill,
Yeah.
I need to put it in my Amazon cart. What are you doing? Send me a link. What is that? What is that? And there's just this chaos, and people are frenetic for answers when a lot of it is just getting back to the basics, getting back to the basics of light, getting back to the basics of nature, being barefoot, having great light routines, maybe living a little bit less tech oriented, especially at night, to reduce that artificial light at night.
Absolutely.
And going back, I think everybody would agree that we are spending too much time on our phone. I mean, I don't think anyone, and I think the real positive for me is I think younger generations are really recognizing it too. They know that they're spending too much time. They know it doesn't have a positive impact on their health. They just don't know what to do. So I think as we communicate about light and the benefits of light, I'm hoping that young people in their 20s and 30s can start making changes that I know that I didn't make. And I know that, had profound effects on my health. So it's an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, and it can be as simple as just put the phone down and go outside, or like as a transition for that population that you're talking about, let's say teens, 20s, 30s. I just tell people, listen, I know that this is a way of life for you to have this phone with you at all times and to be checking in with it regularly.
Right.
check in with it when you're outside
Yeah.
without sunglasses on under full
Yeah.
spectrum light,
Yeah.
because that light signal is dominant compared to the phone. And so it's a way to start to mitigate it. It's like, I'm not taking it away from you. I actually have worked with people who have a legit addiction to screens. It's a legit dopamine addiction. And it's not take your phone away completely. It's
Right.
use it outside and become addicted to that natural light signal, which is what we're designed to have the dopamine hit with. And then this matters less. We know we're going to get a bigger hit if we go outside than if we look at the screen like this.
And it's just this balance. Blue
Balance.
always has to be balanced with red. And so I usually
Yes.
say to my kids, if you're on your phone, just go outside. Just
Yep.
balance the blue with red. Whatever you have to do,
Yep.
don't even get off your phone. If you have to communicate, balance, balance, balance. Blue is never intended to be by itself in nature, ever. We are
Ever.
intended to be inside, sitting on screens all night. It's not what we're intended to do. And it is taking its toll on our health. A couple quick questions before I know I just want to get a couple things in. Women in their 40s, hormones are a big issue. I feel like women are kind of, having this, pregnenolone steal syndrome and the things that you and I have talked about. But really practically, what can women do with light to help their hormones that has nothing to do with hormone replacement therapy or creams or any of the things that everyone seems to be trying? How can we use light to help our hormones?
Yeah, I mean, this is huge because I think light is true. I guess toxins can be dysregulating for hormones and stress. I mean, I get all that, but I think light can be both one of, if we don't get it right, it can be one of the most dysregulating things. And also doing appropriate light strategies, it can be quickly regulating and rebalancing for the hormones. And so that morning light, that sunrise light. So I would call it, to give people a window of time, let's say from sunrise until UVA rise, like that window of time. That is when our brain is signaling to our adrenal glands, the mitochondria in our adrenal glands, to make our major sex hormone, like the start of our sex hormone pathway is called pregnenolone. And then that pregnenolone gets kind of cut up or ferried, if you will, into all of our steroid hormones, depending on the time of day, the time of the month, fertility, all those things. And so it's designed to be a surge of cortisol that's healthy in the morning. That's what we want to have happen. And then we want a balanced blend of progesterone, estrogen, DHEA, testosterone. We want that to be also built in a balanced way. And that happens through that light signaling stimulation. Now, if you start to sync earthing, because that's a form of electrical nourishment, with that morning light signaling, with a nourishing breakfast, you've literally given your brain all the signals it needs to think that there's not a threat, that you're safe, and that you can keep your hormones balanced towards optimum fertility and have those change in a controlled way so that you don't experience symptoms of perimenopause, right? So that can absolutely happen. And then conversely, what we're doing in the evening is we are not blocking the artificial light at night. So in the same way that blue light in the morning from the sun or from nature will start to trigger that pregnenolone pathway, that's a healthy and well-timed place where we want those hormones to surge. At night, when it's supposedly dark and we're needing to make melatonin to go to sleep and repair our bodies, instead, if we look at our screens past darkness, we're surging that pathway again. So we're going to make that pregnenolone, we're going to make that cortisol, we're going to suppress melatonin, and we're going to overproduce steroid hormones. That's where you get into situations like estrogen dominance or this big change in estrogen levels to progesterone, right? And it really has to do with the fact that we're not designed to have that secondary surge of steroid hormones. And unfortunately, it's also why that secondary surge is associated with all sorts of hormonally driven cancers these days. So artificial light at night is tied to breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. It has to do with that light signaling. So block it, mitigate it, put those blue blockers on at night,
Right.
get the morning light, it rebalances itself out.
Right. And just on the day to day for many women that have kids, you're busy, you're working, you're picking them up from
Yes.
school, and then the only time you really have to yourself to get stuff done is night. So that's when you're going on your computer. And so these women are like, okay, 9 o'clock, the kids are asleep. Now I've got to get my stuff done. And which is really the worst time for them to be in front of this kind of alien blue light that is not mitigated with red.
You're 100% right. And the problem is that initially people feel like they're going to get a second wind. So the number of people who do that, it's like, oh, I just got the kids to bed, and then zing, you get this blue light into your eyes, and it's like, oh, this
Like
is my
I'm so
productive time,
productive.
woo, right? But like
Right.
over the long haul, that's very dysregulating. And so
Yeah.
if you do need to do it, mitigate your screen, make it red. Like honestly, you really want to make that screen as boring and red as possible.
Right.
Or wear those deep orange tone blue blockers so that you're not getting that secondary surge into your eyes and thinking or artificially stimulating your brain into thinking, oh, I'm a night owl. This is my productivity time. It's like, no, your body was asking to wind down and you just artificially stimulated it.
Exactly. Before we go, I do want to talk about your challenge coming up and
Oh, cool.
but I just think it's a really cool way because I think, the hardest part is just starting and people
Hmm.
need just little things to do.
Yeah.
So can you talk about your upcoming spring equinox challenge and I think spring is just really, it's such a perfect time for people to start with this. If you're new to light and grounding and quantum biology, whatever you want to call it, it's just about letting your body work for you. And I think, a lot of people aren't feeling well. And I keep saying, the best healer is in you. You have the ability. You just need to let, your environment help you because there's so many helpful things. We just need to do that. Do you want to talk a little bit about your reset and what's happening as of March 20th?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so starting on March 20th, you have to be signed up by then. It's my spring reset challenge. And it's a 14-day challenge. You'll get one little tiny video, like a 5 to 8 minute-ish video emailed to you every morning for 14 days that goes over this stuff, but gives you the specifics. Yes, there's some science because it's me, Shannon, right? I can't omit the science,
You
but
gotta
it's
nerd out.
you got to nerd out a little bit, but it's really practical as well in terms of how to use the light for resetting your circadian rhythm, how to use it for gut health, how to use it if you have autoimmune conditions. What about building this, what we call this solar adaptation, the solar callus? What are other ways that we can utilize what spring has? So I do talk about earthing and grounding. So this is the perfect time of year to engage with light, to engage with nature, to engage with earthing, and start to feel the benefits that we're talking about. And this challenge I just found was like a very affordable, bite-sized way to do it. And I had done challenges in the winter before, and I started to do a spring one, and the feedback for these challenges is phenomenal. This is really truly people's entry point into appreciating light, and then it just carries with them throughout the course of the rest of the year. And so it's just exciting. And if anyone's interested, please feel free to check out my website, check out my spring reset challenge. It's a phenomenal way to start to introduce yourself to this information.
Great, great. And I think spring is lovely for beginners.
Yes.
It's blossoming, it's new growth, but it's a great time to introduce yourself to the sun because the sun isn't intimidating. And I think what happens is that people don't develop a relationship with the sun. And
Right.
then, summer comes around July 4th, and then all of a sudden they have a relationship with the sun. Well, your body says, you know what? I'm not a one night stand. You had to build this relationship with me for a long time through your eyes and on your skin.
Yeah.
And then when you understand how powerful it is as it's your own internal sunscreen, you're protecting yourself from the damaging, more damaging rays of light. So, we are almost, I know you are a very busy person and I so appreciate this time. Will you make me one promise that we can talk to you again maybe in the fall and
Oh
kind
yeah.
because I think,
Like
kind of the
prep for
fall,
winter time too. Yeah.
yes, because I think the fall again and the winter, the sun changes, but that doesn't mean that life is over. So we're going to build our
No.
vitamin D now. We're going to get as strong as we can for winter. We're going to build our immune systems. And then what do we do in the winter? It's not a death sentence. It
It's
doesn't mean we
not.
have to be sick. It doesn't mean seasonal affective disorder. It
No.
can mean a really great healing time. And I think that's
100%. Yeah.
exciting.
I'd
So
love to chat with you again. That's phenomenal.
great. Great. All right. Thank you very much. And I'm excited about your reset. I'm going to sign up too. I'm
Cool.
I need reminders. I need Carrie in my life.
Thanks, Shannon. So
All right.
great chatting with you
Have a
today.
great day.
All
Thanks
right.
so much. Okay,
Bye.
bye.